Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Producers Guild conversation with the creative team behind Giving Voice. We'd like to thank our friends at Netflix for making this event possible. It is my pleasure today to introduce our moderator. Jazz Tangcay is the Artisans Editor for Variety and a part of the Variety Awards Circuit team. Welcome, Jazz. Welcome, panelists. And Jazz, please take it away.
Thank you, Kyle. Thank you to the Producers Guild and of course, Netflix. I am really, really excited to be here today talking about the new documentary, Giving Voice, which is coming to Netflix in December. The words of August Wilson are brought to life in this incredible documentary, which follows students in an annual monologue competition inspired by America's preeminent playwright. So without further ado, I'm excited to introduce today's panel with director and producer James Stern, director and producer Fernando Villena, producer Karen Bove, and producer Schoen Smith. Hi.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Thank you. I am so excited. As soon as I finished this documentary, I was like, okay, which August Wilson plays do I have? And then I hung my head in shame. But let's just go back, and this is one for everybody, but what is your first memory of August Wilson, and were any of you fortunate enough to see his great plays on Broadway? And James, I'll start with you.
Well, I was fortunate enough, and not to age myself, but my first experience was actually up in the balcony seeing James Earl Jones doing Troy Maxwell in Fences, and it just blew me away. I mean, it was like, you know, I've produced, in addition to the films that I've done, I've produced about 20 things on Broadway and off, and so the theater is a big deal for me, and that was, you know, when I saw it, I was just stunned as much as anything, I think, by the father-son relationship in Fences, and then, you know, I was really, you know, made it my business to try and understand why he wasn't in the pantheon at that point, or talked about at that point, the way Arthur Miller was, or Eugene O'Neill was, or, you know, Tennessee Williams, or even someone like Edward Albee. I was then fortunate to see Joe Turner's Piano Lesson, Seven Guitars. I saw them all on Broadway. So and Ma Rainey's. So I saw all of those on Broadway, and it pretty much, you know, I've read everything now, and I've seen productions of everything too, I believe. But those I saw on Broadway, and I think that it was, you know, I mean, just knocked out, completely knocked out.
Yeah. What about you, Fernando?
I grew up in Miami, which isn't a hotbed of theater, you know. I just, but I do remember watching the Piano Lesson on TV when I was young. I remember it. I remember being kind of confused by watching it, because you know, I didn't know it was based on a play when I saw it, but it did leave an impression on me. And of course, I saw Fences when it came out. But my real introduction to August Wilson was making this film.
Wow, which we are going to talk about in a second. But Karen, what about for you? What was your first memory of August Wilson?
I'll be honest, mine was also the film Fences. Unfortunately, I was not introduced to his work, as vast as it is, until this project. So I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to work on this and learn about him.
And Shane, for you?
So for me, it would have been in acting class when I moved to LA. It was one of Rose's monologue was the monologue that I was given to perform. And so at the time, you know, I was very young and I didn't really feel like I could give much to it, but it was my first introduction to August Wilson. So that was then, only a few years ago.
Wow. You know, what the other thing that we're also diving into in the documentary is the August Wilson monologue competition, which again, I just learned about after watching the documentary, which started in 2011, I believe. So how did you first hear about that competition, James, if you want to take that one?
Sure. So Costanza Romero, who's August's widow, had seen a prior film that I had done that I directed or co-directed, and that Fernando had at that point edited, called Every Little Step, which was about the creation of a chorus line. And in that film, Michael Bennett sort of assumes the kind of creative, is the person who's the creative force behind a chorus line. And then there's all these, actors who are auditioning for a revival. And so it goes back and forth in time. And Costanza had seen that and loved it. And so she actually sought us out and me out, through Endeavor, where we both were or are, and asked if I would be, I'd never heard of the monologue competition, honestly. I knew, as it turned out, I had, friends at Jujamcyn, which is the theater organization that sponsors the competition in New York. So I did know a lot of people, but I didn't really know about the competition. And I went up to, when I heard about it, I just knew how much I loved August Wilson. And, and I talked to Fernando right away, and he said, oh my God, this would be such a cool thing to do, go and meet with her. And so I went and met with Costanza. We just talked about her husband and his work, and Fernando had said something, which was really brilliant at the time, which was, if we can figure, this is something where we can make a competition movie, not about competition, but about something that's sort of, more important than that. And so I went to see Costanza with that idea in mind, and we talked for about, a few hours. And, her house was like, had like, the pianos there in the house and the guitars on one side, and, all these, these symbols of his work. It was almost like being on stage or whatever, at that point in her living room. So that's how it started.
Yeah. Why has it taken, I think, Till Fences with Denzel and Viola, the movie, I think really shine it. Why has it taken us so long to finally shine a light on August Wilson? And, between the documentary and next month or December even, we'll have Ma Rainey, with Viola and the starring role and Chadwick Boseman, but it's 2020.
From a theatrical standpoint, because I've done so much commercial theater, I can probably jump in on that. I think that it's, there's a lot of complicated reasons for it. I think that the one reason, which is to not cast aspersions, but just to sort of try and contextualize it, is I think that when it comes to commercial theater, producers are always concerned about finding audiences and things like that. And I think that there was, August became the first African-American playwright to break through. And, and now there will be, I'm sure a lot more, and there's already been more, of course. But I think that was, he wasn't put on the same pedestal as some of these other playwrights, because the experience of seeing plays of his in a commercial setting wasn't as prevalent as it was for actors, doing O'Neill and Williams and Miller. Wrongly so, clearly, which is one of the reasons why I was so eager, and Fernando was so eager to jump in and do this. But I think that he was not. I had friends in New York who actually, one of my best friends in New York actually produced the original version of Ma Rainey's, and it was at the time seen as quite risky. And so it was, I think that's probably one reason, I guess, because, the writing is so extraordinary and gifted, and it's not, it contextualizes, race and politics and society, but within a kind of familial setting. The plays are extraordinary.
Well, one thing I'd like to add to that is something that I learned through making the film, is that, his work isn't taught in schools. No, they're not part of the curriculum. So it's not part of the canon of plays that everybody knows that, like there's another movie of The Crucible. Yeah, who's in it? Let's go watch it. This isn't, if his work was taught more, I think there'd be, his plays would have been produced, made into films much earlier than now.
Right, and I think that it's like becomes a chicken and egg too. You're absolutely right, Fern. That's absolutely right, and I think that schools didn't get they didn't get hip to him because they weren't seeing like big productions of him. So like it became like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, there weren't commercial productions because they weren't taught in schools. They weren't taught in schools because they weren't commercial productions. And next thing you know, he's not talked about in the same way, which is now, you know, through, you know, Netflix and Denzel Washington, and I'm glad to say our film, that's going to end.
Yeah. And Karen and Shane, when James and Fernando came to you with this idea, what was your first reaction? Especially, you know, Shane, you studied August in, acting school.
Yeah, I said, absolutely, this has to be done. I think, to Fernando's point, the fact that students don't know about this. I grew up in Kansas and I was not familiar with August Wilson's work. The name, I was just like, August Wilson, who is this? Another, no offense, white guy. I was like, I don't know who this is. And so, so then when I started to think about the possibilities and everything, it invigorated me so much. And so it was really just a beautiful, wonderful opportunity that I couldn't pass up. So yeah, that was it for me.
Yeah, I'll say, I mean, it was really, as soon as they had mentioned about it, it was like, I got to read about him and reading up on him and what his plays were about. I thought it was also a very important thing to do as well, is get his work out there. So shining a light on this competition and the students, I think it's really, really important. So
yeah, the students are so inspiring, every single one of them, Aaron, Freedom, all of them. But like, how did you hone in on which students you wanted to highlight for the documentary?
Well, we started with, we couldn't be everywhere all at once. I mean, it was 12 cities. We're one camera crew and we're doing a documentary, so we have, certain limitations. So we started by deciding on a hero city. And the hero city in this case was Chicago. Which is where Shane, was located and where I'm from, and try to always remind Fernando that it's the greatest city on earth. And so we followed the actors really religiously in Chicago. And then you could see Freedom's talent pretty quickly and Nia's talent pretty quickly. And you saw what a singular aspect of Cody that made him really special. And so that allowed us to and there was plenty of those kids who we followed who did not end up in the movie, of course. So, we followed a lot of kids and they didn't all end up there. And then after that, we branched out to the other cities as well. So that's sort of how we branched out to Atlanta and Los Angeles and Houston, because we also wanted to get a length and breadth of the country as best we could. We went to New York and we ended up not using what we ended up shooting in New York. Because again, not everything can fit in. Is that, Fern, did I do that all right?
Yeah, that was great. I think the only other, it really is a lot. There's a lot of luck involved, in casting kids on the fly like that. There's an aspect of the film that we wanted to show, which is the craft of acting, like somebody learning actually how to act, right? Learning the craft. And most of our young actors were already trained to a certain degree. But Cody was very raw. He came from an English class, right? That's where he learned about the competition. So what's great about him is that we got to see him actually learn acting, like aspects of that, like how to deliver a monologue. And he was being taught by actors, he was being taught by his coaches. And that was something that we definitely wanted to show, and not just have it be just trained actors, competing. We wanted to shine a light on the craft itself. So, and he turned out to be great. And he's such a great character and such a special human. And he gave everything, and you see him giving everything. to the craft, which I think is really special and makes the film what it is.
You know, that's right. And it reminds me that anybody who thinks that you don't need a heck of a lot of luck when you're making a documentary to make a really terrific documentary is just wrong. I mean, these kids are magical, and you know, and we were lucky to be there. But you know, if we did this in a different year or whatever, the film wouldn't have been what it was. I mean, the kids are absolutely magical that we followed, and that's you know, that's on them.
Yeah. And how much time did you actually spend with each of the kids, following them around, like getting their story? And how did you divide that work between the two of you?
Fern, you can, yeah.
Yeah, so since there were two of us, you know, we were able to split up, and so one of us, I mean, to start off, Shane was out there in Chicago, like, and Shane and Karen just with like all these camera crews, you know, trying to capture everything. I was actually really ill the first month. I couldn't even travel to Chicago. So right. Jim was out there. By the time I got on, it was able to get out there. We were able to identify who we were going to follow a bit more. Yeah,
I mean, I think that you shoot first, you ask questions later. You know, Shane did a great job being, you know, Chicago based, and also in, you know, working in the theater in Chicago. She can answer that herself, but that was a huge help. And then we just shot a lot of stuff. We just shot and shot and shot. And that the auditions were all in a central place, so that was easier. And then, we followed along with a lot of kids. And again, some of it didn't all make the movie, but we followed a lot. Shane, you want to?
Yeah, so we started out, there's, 400 students basically competing in Chicago, 20 different schools, and then they have the preliminaries, and then the semifinals, and then the finals. So we're just basically spraying at the beginning everywhere, shooting all the kids that we could come up with, and then and interviewing students. And I think that their personalities rose, the ones who eventually ended up making it. They just shined very brightly, as I think can be seen in the film. But yeah, it was, I don't know what the hours were. Maybe Karen might know how many hours we actually filmed the students, but it was a lot of students.
Multiple cameras, multiple days, yeah.
So yeah, and it was great to get to talk to each of these students and to just see and feel what this competition meant to each of them. So, as beautiful as these students are on camera, there's just as many who competed in this competition that didn't make it. So that's, again, what I enjoyed the most as part of this process.
I love that. And whilst you're following this, the students, in the competition, you're also telling the story of August Wilson. Like, how did you manage to weave all of that in and get that balance to tell their story and, more importantly, his story?
To some degree, it's always trial and error. To sort of follow, Fern's edict, we wanted to make a competition movie that was more than a competition movie. So that was always at the top of, what we wanted to do. And it certainly was what my very first conversation was with Costanza. I mean, we always thought we wanted to make a film that, that if August himself had seen it, that he would have thought did him justice and did what he was trying to accomplish justice. So that meant that it was really important to try and delve down into not only where he came from, but his writing process, how he came up, what professional actors' experiences were with those roles, which is, we got incredibly, blessed by having Viola Davis's participation, and Julia Tennant, her husband's participation, and then Denzel Washington's participation as well, and then John Legend, who produced Jitney on Broadway. So, we were weaving all that together is really complicated, and it took us a long time. And we had several editors going, and and it's trial and error.
Right. The other thing we did was we did have 3 editors, and we put them in one room together.
Right.
And we just like throw them food, right? Just like And this movie's a classic like example of reduce without being reductive, right? Like just at a certain point, the film is, as far as the competition goes, there's a beginning, middle, and end to it. And then when there's like these moments where we're able to contextualize with either August's life or the competition, we can contextualize with Viola Davis or with Denzel Washington, and they can talk really eloquently about acting, or about or about acting in one of August's plays, and it just kind of brings the whole thing to life, and it's this amazing glue that we had. Is these two people, which was really incredible. But yeah, it was just be reduced without being reductive.
Yeah, that's right. And then we tried to, and we added in Jack Vertel, who was, the forefront of producing August's plays on Broadway, Preston, who developed the plays at the O'Neill Center and really discovered August, and many did discover August. So, I mean, we also, we got great people who really felt an urgency to talk about August Wilson and to shine a light on him as being a necessary playwright in the pantheon of great American playwrights.
Yeah. And not only did Viola Davis, appear, does she appear in the documentary, but she and her husband Julius, they're also on board as executive producers. So at what stage did that happen?
Early, really early. I don't remember exactly when, but it was really important to have significant people, as part of the process, and they love August, and obviously Viola is also starring right now in Ma Rainey's for Netflix, and had won the Tony Award for Fences, et cetera, et cetera. So she was eager to do it, and then Denzel was as well. But that happened very early on.
Yeah. One of my favorite moments is when you follow them to Broadway and they're at the stage door of Once on This Island, which I have seen too. But like, I love when they're talking and asking questions at stage door. Like, talk about filming that moment, and what was it like following them there?
It was great. Just to see their eyes as big as saucers. And because I started in the theater myself, not as an actor, but as as somebody who wanted to produce and direct, I had all those same experiences. I was hanging out, desperately trying to talk to somebody at the stage door who, seemed like, I can't believe I'm actually being able to like talk to this person. And the funny thing is, the actress who had been nominated for the Tony was like 19 years old, or whatever she was. I mean, she was only like a year older than they were. But it was just a wonderful, wonderful moment to be able to capture. I mean, when you capture stuff like that, verite and documentary, it's just the best.
It was kismet. It just felt like such perfect timing, because Haley had gone through the competition before, and that just happened to happen. So it was just a wonderful thing to see come alive, and to be able to create that moment, and to have these students. It's, you'll never forget your first time going to see a Broadway show ever. And so to be there for that with them, and then to get them, have the opportunity to speak to an actress who's been through it with them, it was tremendous. I think they really appreciated it and got a lot out of it.
Yeah. They are so inspiring. And I mean, what did you learn from spending time with them, hearing their stories, following their journey whilst making this?
I think the biggest surprise for me, and I'm a father of two of kids who are sort of similarly aged to these kids, was how inspired I was by them, and how much they taught me about courage, and the courage to, first of all, as Denzel Washington says in the movie, it takes a lot of guts, to do what they do. I mean, I couldn't have done it. I would have been terrified, just beyond measure. And, some of them, have gone through, circumstances which are quite hard. I mean, one character's, mom, had a brain tumor, lost her job, and all of a sudden they went from being fairly well off to being really unwell off. And, somebody else, suffered, a tremendous tragedy in his family. I mean, and somebody else had, a very complicated set of, two sets of parents in a very complicated way. The way in which they came through things and the way in which they not just held their heads up, but also their spirits and their intelligence were so at the forefront at all times, I found astonishing. Like I said, I have kids similarly aged, and I was just blown away.
Yeah, they have so much joy in their lives.
Yeah.
And, it's not an easy thing. It's not an easy thing to come across these days, right? But they had it, and they had it in abundance. And with that, they were able to really take on this material, which is, at times quite dark, and really embody it and make people feel it, and they're so young, and some of their characters that they're portraying, they're older, they're like 40s, they're 40s, 50s, and you totally feel the emotion, and you go along the ride with them in their monologues. But once it's over, they're kids, and they're like happy, and they like want to do well, and they're super inspired to succeed.
And to be able to do this movie, and have it come out in this year, which has been so challenging, I think is, an incredible gift for all of us. And to sort of experience, to see the world to some degree through their eyes, is also really important and, certainly really significant for me.
Yeah. You talked about the hours of footage that you had, and then you've also got the interviews, with Viola, with Denzel, with Costanza, August Widow. Like, how did you talk about editing that? Like, how long that all took to work together? Fernando, you said you had like 3 editors working in a room together.
Right. Well, yeah, it was a process. We talk a lot about the footage, the amount of footage, but really the bulk of the footage was shot in that first couple of months, because we just had to like shoot a lot to find the story, right? As the project advanced, we were able to focus more. So, towards when we got to Broadway, we knew kind of what we were doing at that point. So the footage wasn't as daunting. But first we had to cut a little promo piece to be able to sell the piece, right? Just like all these little things, had to be done along the way. And each time you do something, you find the story a little bit more and a little bit more. And I remember like one of the big breakthroughs for the film was when just noodling around, we found August's clip where he says, I'm paraphrasing, but in order to know where you're going, you need to know what your history is, right? And I was like, well, that's the first line of the film. That has to be the first line of the film. And once you get something like that, it just kind of like sets you on a path, right? And then we were able to follow that path, and the movie just kind of began to unfold. But it was like, what are we trying to say here? In order to survive this future that we're in, we need to know where we're coming from. We need to know how we got here. And he did that. And he chronicled the 20th century, and he left it for everybody to investigate and to feel. So that was a big moment editorially for us.
I think that, Fernando and I always seem to be like to go through the post process like we're building a jigsaw puzzle. We look for the corner pieces and try and figure out what's happening from there. I mean, some people seem to like say like they can like talk about the whole arc of a documentary before they start, and I've never been one of those people, and certainly when Fern and I've worked together, I don't think we've ever done that either. We just you know, we build it as it goes.
Yeah.
One quick thing as well is music was so important for us, right? To tell the story and to tonally tell the story. Like with the right music, we'd have to say less because we could emote more in different ways and not just have people telling you how you should be feeling all the time, right? So, but Brian Senti, our composer, was great. And one thing about that is we didn't work with temp music at all. He didn't hear one piece of temp music. He wrote everything for us, and that was the deal from the beginning. We didn't want anybody else's music in his head while he's trying to write a film for August and for these young people. So, but that really helped out in the edit because from the very beginning of the edit, we're cutting to our music, not Hans Zimmer or somebody else.
Yeah. And since you're talking about music, John Legend contributed an amazing song that just gave me goosebumps everywhere. But talk about like getting him to write that song and what it was like hearing that for the first time.
Well, it was, first of all, you know, we wanted him so badly because for one thing, he had produced Jitney and we had heard that he was a huge August Wilson fan. So, and you know, nobody could be better. You know, we wanted a song which would be inspiring and a song which would sort of, you know, somebody who would understand what the material was. So, so that was certainly in our head. He saw the movie and loved it and decided to do it. And that was great. And then we're like, okay, now we're made in the shade. This is fantastic. This is incredible. We have John Legend. Oh my God, you know, and then we waited. And then we waited some more, and then we waited a little more, and we got into Sundance and with a temp song, and we still hadn't heard his song, and it was the day that, you know, I was talking to Mike Jackson, who's his partner, who's one of our executive producers also, who's fantastic, and he kept on saying, "Dude, he's got this, don't worry about it." And I'm like, okay, but we have to like lock the damn picture. We have to send it. We have to mix it. We have to show this at Sundance. And it got to the last day and we still had not heard the song. and Fernando and I were both just like freaking out, honestly. And then, I mean, it was probably like less than an hour before we were going to ripcord it. The song came in and I heard the song and I just had tears in my eyes, and I'm sure you did too. It was a great story.
I had a lot of emotions going on, but yeah, music, the song was like perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
You know, it was such a great anthem, not just for this movie, but for like this year. It's just such an incredible gift to the film, but it was just as Jim explained it. That's how it went down.
Karen and Shane, what was it like for you hearing it after the song finally came in?
I mean, same. I was about to get on a flight when it popped up in my email, and I was like, and then I just like immediately there was like this huge sense of relief, and then like this huge sense of like, this is perfect and incredible, and just like, yeah, I like he hit it like nail on the head. It was perfect.
Tears. I just started just crying. I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is perfect. So couldn't be happier.
Yeah. I mean, it really is the song for 2020. Honestly, Never Break. I mean, my God.
Yeah, right. It's an anthem. Another incredible moment is, you know, after hearing, you know, one of the characters has this tragedy and you tied in with Wilson, but then seeing the finalists and hearing the monologues at the end, like, what was that like as filmmakers to be in that room capturing that part of their journey?
It's amazing, you know, because you're trying to be objective as a filmmaker and trying to be objective in terms of what you're getting, but you're also so tied in with the kids and with the competition itself and with and who's gonna win or whatever. And it's hard to maintain objectivity. It's, at least it was for me. What do you think?
As much as I didn't want it to be a competition movie, like in its kind of makeup, right, and its intention, I was really hoping that one of our guys would win, that one of our kids would win at that. And it was terrifying,
Oh, that's right. Of
One,
course,
we had two up there. We had two, and first and second.
No spoilers. No spoilers. No spoilers.
Right. We can't spoil it. We're not spoiling it.
Okay.
Right. So I'm a total spoiler. So that was great. But you want them all to win at that point. You want them all to take away something from it. But I think that competition is special in the sense that, most of them probably aren't going to pursue acting careers, but they will be better at whatever they do for doing this competition and going through this process, because it does take a lot of guts to get up on stage and perform these monologues in front of, not just in front of, their classes and their schools, but their judges, and then on Broadway. That's a lot. It's a lot. And that's a gift for them that they're going to carry with them. And so, I hope that we accomplish the fact that it's not just about the competition. There's something bigger at stake.
The ending where you edit with their faces looking at the camera, and then we've got the voice and the speech start to play, talk about, it's so beautiful. Talk about landing on that ending.
I think that that very much the idea of August Wilson giving them voice and them giving August Wilson voice is something that we had not named the movie yet, but that is sort of was in our heads. And so I think that became, we had those portraits, and I don't remember how that came to be, but as soon as one of our editors put it in, it was just, yes, that's amazing, because that also tells so much about the kids, and there's something very special, and in sort of, it gives them a kind of, their spirit is so embodied there. And after having just watched them all this time, there's trial and error, but it landing on that was gold.
Yeah. What did you learn anything new about August whilst making the film?
Yes, absolutely. I learned about his process and about, I'm really interested in writing in general and the process of writing. And so August's process is so free-formed, or was so free-formed, I should say, that's something I hadn't yet encountered. I mean, you don't usually, people, especially playwrights and screenwriters, but especially playwrights, have a real serious arc in mind and a narrative progression in mind. And he didn't. I mean, he would start with a monologue, and just voices would sort of come to him, and he would put them down. He was almost, channeling voices and things like that. I mean, it was quite extraordinary. I mean, early plays of his were, 4 or 5, 6 hours long before he would start cutting them. I mean, it's a process that's quite magical, and that really was, I think, for me, that was really extraordinary to hear about all that.
And Karen, what about for you? What did you learn about August?
I think along the same lines, that was something I didn't know about the writing process that he had. It was very interesting, and a lot of the students kind of took that into themselves as they were learning to perform their monologues on what he had written. And so listening to people around them, and whether they're in a coffee shop or on the subway, they took that in and brought that into their monologues themselves. And then just that, he wrote, the way he wrote was that, you know, in a way such that like anybody can understand what he's saying. Like they might not be able to truly, you know, from their core know, because they didn't grow up with what he was writing about, but you can really understand, I think, what he wrote when you can read his work and then see it performed by, you know, students that have had this experience in their own lives. So
amazing. What about for you, Schoen?
Yeah, so much. I think what's so great about, sort of tied in with the competition, is that these students learn just as much from doing these monologues about themselves as they do studying August Wilson's life. His life is an inspiration, his process, his journey. And so I think for me, you know, it's one fact, I don't know if this ended up making it in the film, but I remember learning that he set Ma Rainey's in Chicago because he didn't think anybody was interested in Pittsburgh. And so that's why only one of his plays is set in Chicago and the rest are all set in Pittsburgh. So he was discovering himself along the way, I think. And so his journey in writing these characters and writing about his life was simultaneously creating the artist and person that he is and became, and continues to inspire others, generations beyond. And I just feel like his life is an inspiration and his words will just continue to speak for themselves. So, and the music, I think in his language too, is something that resonates with me. The more I've read his works and got to know his spirit, I think that speaks for itself too.
Beautiful. And Fernando, what about you? What did you learn about August Wilson whilst making the documentary?
I didn't know that the century cycle existed. I didn't know what that was, and understanding what it was I found it to be such an extraordinary commitment, like an artistic commitment. And then to find out that he gave up time on this earth to be able to finish the last play, because he was sick at the end of his life. You know, he had cancer, and he didn't want to take any meds that would dull him to the point where he wouldn't be able to finish the play. So he lived with that pain and he lived with the agony of his illness, but he was able to finish, just finish. And he gave his life for art. And I think that's such a powerful statement.
Yeah. I think Costanza saying that in the documentary too made that so much more powerful. And it's like, that's the one that I want to go and read. But I really, Giving Voice is such an incredible documentary. It's inspiring, and John Legend's song is phenomenal. And this is, August Wilson, it's 2020, we're getting a spotlight on him. And, thanks to this incredible documentary, and Ma Rainey is going to be on Netflix in December. So I want to thank you all.
I'll say just one last thing before we go, which is our greatest compliment has come from Costanza when she said that August would have loved the film.
Amazing. Amazing. James, Schoen, Karen, Fernando, thank you so much for this incredible conversation and documentary. And thank you to the Producers Guild and to Netflix.
Thank you, Jazz. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.